In a culture that tells us we can choose motherhood or, Good Counsel knows we're meant for motherhood and. Hi, I'm Samantha Elbertson. I work on behalf of the maternity home Good Counsel. We have 4 homes in New York and New Jersey where motherhood is rescued, preserved, and celebrated every day. Welcome to our podcast, Motherhood and, where we spend time talking with women living out their vocation of motherhood and their roles in the community. We speak to pro-life activists, contributors to Catholic culture, entrepreneurs, great legal minds, gentle, humble hearts, those who work on behalf of women in need, breaking cycles of poverty, abuse, and homelessness, and mothers working every day to form and nourish a new generation. This is Motherhood and. With me today is Jeffrey Bruno. He's a Catholic photojournalist from New York, father of 2, grandfather of 1 and 1 on the way, and a longtime supporter of Good Counsel. In speaking with Jeff recently, it was his mention of a podcast that was the final aha moment. He said, "It's easy, just start talking." So here we are, and let's talk. Let's get into it. Hi, Jeff. And let's begin with, who is Jeff Bruno? Why are we talking to you today?
Well, Samantha, thank you. First off, thank you very much for having me. It's an honor, and it's a big privilege to be on your first podcast. It's very super cool. Very glad to see that you're doing it, and so good for you guys. And and I am, as you had mentioned, I am a longtime supporter of Good Counsel, and I would say a deep advocate and admirer of the work that Good Counsel does. It is particularly needed at this point in time. It has always been needed, but especially now when there's a lot of confusion going on. And, this is, if any aspect of the pro-life movement really needs to grow, I think this is definitely in the top tier of that, because being able to have a secure place for a woman to go who's in a crisis pregnancy, a loving place, a place that's supportive, not only financially or in a material sense, but just emotionally. And it's such a wonderful thing. So can't say enough good things about Good Counsel. So that's, one thing. So just so anybody who's out there wants to support Good Counsel, I should probably save this for the end, right? But at the same time, if anybody
Many times you want.
No, but Good Counsel is wonderful. And I bumped into that. I got involved with Good Counsel when I was asked to come in by Chris Bell, I guess it was at the time, to photograph some of the mothers in some of the homes. And that was, I think, my first encounter with what the life inside a residence was like, and the beauty of it, and the children and whatnot. But at its core, I guess I have a vocation, and it's evangelization through imagery. It's something that I came into. I'm a revert to the faith, I guess is the proper term for it. And I had a long career in the music industry in New York up until my late 30s. And then I had a very big existential crisis, and I left the industry, went on a search, I guess, if you will. And long story short, I found myself at the door of the Catholic Church, and I had one of those big epiphanies, one of those big moments of conversion. And at that point in time, I realized that, the only thing that was really worth doing was, serving God and building the kingdom. And so what ended up happening was that I started out building websites, because it was about communication, communicating the faith. And especially, this was 2004, 2005. Communicating the faith, digitally was something that I thought was lacking, and something that I was capable of. And then I started taking pictures in order to support the websites and things that I was working on, and one thing led to another. So one of the questions I get asked frequently is like, well, it's, when did you, or were you always taking pictures? And it's like, well, honestly, no, I never started taking pictures until this came about, until I came into the faith. I came and started taking pictures so that I could show the faith, and I didn't know how to take pictures in the beginning, and I had to learn. And it just shows that if I can do it, anybody can do it. Quite frankly, it's not some big mystery. And it's been a joy ever since. And it's opened up tremendous opportunities, to see all aspects of the Catholic faith, from the streets of Calcutta to the streets of Mexico City to, throughout the Vatican and Rome, and then right into the doors of Good Counsel, and to see the beauty and the richness and the mission of the church. Because the beauty of the church is not only visual, or I should say it's not only visual, it's in the activity, it's in the life of the church, it's in the service, it's in the love that is provided, through faith to others. It's, Christ's love through others, and to be able to see that. Once you start to see that and start to witness that and start to experience that, all you want to do is show that, because it's just the most beautiful thing that there is, because God is the author of beauty. He is beauty incarnate. So that's where it comes from. It's the source of all beauty. And again, right back to Good Counsel homes, you walk into one of those homes and it is beautiful. It's beauty in the mission, of the house mothers, and the relationships between the residents. And you can tell when you walk in there that it's a warm, loving, supportive environment that does something that, boys, again, so needed today in this day and age. So
yeah, it is. It's beautiful, and it's real. It's not sugar-coated or rosy. It's real life, and just to see women supporting each other, and everyone who works on the staff in the homes, from the maintenance men who change the light bulbs and work on the heater. I mean, it's just all grace. Sure. It's all grace.
And to your point, it is real. So the thing is, that it's not always perfect all the time, but it's real. But it's like family, right?
Sure, it's a genuine beauty.
Yeah. I mean, there's there's the hardships, and there's the things and the struggles, but there's the love that undergirds it all, and props it up, I guess you could say.
Absolutely. So. Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about your job history? You said musician, and then
I'll put it like this. Maybe there's a lesson in this. When I was young, when I was a kid, I was probably 8 years old, 9 years old. I knew exactly what I wanted to be when I grew up. I wanted to be a musician. I wanted to be a rock star. I wanted to do all these things. It's like there are a lot of people that were trying to figure it out as they go, 15, 16 years old. I had a path. It's like I knew where I wanted to go and what I wanted to be. And that, that it all, it took a lot of very interesting turns. I was trained as a classical musician, and then went to college for that, and ended up getting kicked out of that college because of an artistic disagreement with the professor, which is such a weird thing. Apparently there's different schools in classical music, and I was from the Baroque Rococo age, and he was a New Age classical instructor or professor or whatever, and we just could not align. It just was impossible, and such a weird artistic difference. Right. Impetuous, rebellious, teenage years and all that, and I left and went into the heavy metal world. Oh. And I discovered a funny thing, though. When I had grown up on computers as well, and this is back in the 80s, of course, when computers technology was not nearly what it is today. It was the Commodore CBM and the PET and the Commodore 64, and it was all the first IBM PCs. But I was enamored with computers when I was younger, and I took a lot of classes in it. So I could do two things. I knew a little bit about computers, and I knew how to read music. So these were two things. And when I found my way into the music industry proper in New York, there was very few people at that point in time in the late 80s that could do both of those things. A lot of people could do computers, a lot of people could read music, but not a lot of people could do the two. And it was right around the age and the era when MIDI was founded. MIDI is a language, a protocol called the Musical Instrument Digital Interface. And it was the first digital keyboards that came out. It was the beginning of an era. It was the end of analog, the beginning of digital. And I was able to do this stuff. I was able to program the things. And before I knew it, I was working for people like Bette Midler and Taylor Dane and Mary J. Blige. I forget who half the people were, but it was like for almost everybody that was in the industry. I was working at the Grammy Awards for everybody. And it was kind of like the dream. And I was only like 21 years old. And I had, I was very, very, I was in demand. And I and basically what I was doing was programming. It was just programming sound. It was, it was cool that I could do it. It's nice to be able to go to these things and meet these people. But but ultimately it was not very satisfying. And I said to I remember kind of coming to a point where I was like, I don't want to do this anymore, and I want to play. And I worked with an artist who was a German recording artist, German heavy metal artist, Doro Pesch. She had a band called Warlock. And she came into the studio I was working in at the time, and she was like, Jeff, do you know anybody who plays keyboard and guitars? And I said, I do. And I got hired. And then I did a couple of world tours with her, and it was wonderful and it was great. And, playing and got to experience what it was like to be on stage in front of tens of thousands of people. And during that period of time, I became engaged and to my wife. And after the last tour I was on, I kind of was like, no, I don't really want to do this either. It wasn't fulfilling, it wasn't. So I went into the production side of things and went to work for a studio. It's called Power Station. It was the third largest studio in the world at the time. And for a guy named Tony Bon Jovi, who's John Bon Jovi's second cousin, and there's a whole bunch of stuff to that. 600 gold and platinum albums at this place is wonderful. Huh. And working in that environment was great. You're at the top. It's like it was all the elite artists. It's like everybody from AC/DC to Sarah McLachlan. It's like we saw everybody. It was a constant, wonderful, creative, beautiful thing. Thoroughly unsatisfied. It's like I was in it. I realized my wife and I were living in this high rise overlooking New York Harbor. My son was just born, and we're right on the water. Right, we have everything. I have a parking spot in New York City, which is like an insane thing to have, especially when you're not even 30 yet. And I was miserable. I had arrived where I had thought I wanted to be, and I was empty. And it's very hard when you feel that there's something you're striving for in your life that's going to fulfill you, and that's what you want to do. And then you get there and you open the box and it's empty. And that's where I was. And it was probably, you look back through the eyes of faith, and you look back on your life, and if you look at the things, you can see where God kind of pushed you and like kind of prodded you in certain ways. And I guess it was probably necessary for me to go down that path and do those things. It was wonderful from the standpoint that I got to experience a lot of things that, well, first off, let's put it this way. I got to try the things that I thought would satisfy me, and they didn't satisfy me. And then when I ended up coming into the church, coming into the faith, I was raised Catholic, but it wasn't the same. Having faith and going to church are two different things. Sure. Or can be. Hopefully they're not. But when I came in, then it was, I had found that it's not satisfaction, that fulfillment, and it was the fulfillment came just sheerly from that relationship with Christ. It wasn't even about doing something. It wasn't about doing evangelization or doing work or working on websites it came from the relationship. It came from just receiving the Blessed Sacrament and kneeling down in prayer. And that's where the fulfillment lies. And it's funny because once you have that, and the rest of it is all, it just glows. It's like it's everything else, because then there's a purpose to it, and it's been, you wonder if it's going to wear off, but this happened in 2004. It's been a few years now, and it's like it just continues to grow and to go. And I would have to say that, the fulfillment is as with that foundation of the fulfillment of the relationship with Christ, then being able to do the things that I've been privileged to do, to be able to spend time with the sisters in Calcutta, the Mother Teresa sisters, and be able to, go around the world and to be able to see these different aspects of the faith. It's such an enriched experience for me personally. And, and that's all fine and good, but, and I try to share that with people, to present the beauty of the church and the mission of the church to people, so that it hopefully touch them or inspire them or motivate them or whatever it is that however that hits, the different things hit people in different ways. It's wonderful. Praise God. I just can't thank him enough for, the thing. So that's my story for the most part.
That's wonderful. So many people spend their lives wondering if they had only, right? If I'd only gotten onto that team, or made it to the top, you got your dreams, and you still realized what actually fulfills. So that's incredible.
That's the thing, right? And that's a lesson, I think, for all of us. It's like, and I'm not a unique story. It's like at the point where it's at the bottom, the real bottom of it all. Like before we bought a house, which is a really wacky story, but we bought this house we weren't planning on buying, and we ended up buying this house in the Jersey Shore, and it's only about 2 blocks from a church. And we were going through this. I was going through this crisis, and I had already been like a solid 3 years in this crisis, was right around 9/11 when that happened too. And it's just after, because it was both out in 2004. So somebody had said, go to mass. Well, yeah, I was explaining my problem, and everybody's like, poor you, Jeff, unsatisfied with his career. So, but they said, well, you should go to church, and you should go to confession and go to church. And I was like, huh.
Good advice.
So I know, and just there's a very important point to be made there. Sometimes it's that easy, sometimes that's all you've got to say to somebody, because that's all it took for me. You think to yourself, well, tell them to go to that. It's like, no, got to come with some big theological, no. Right. Sometimes it's, why don't you pray about it? Maybe, sometimes that's the thing that somebody needs.
Yeah.
So therefore, but I ended up doing that, and I went for, and I realized, the one thing, I raised Catholic, I understood some things, and one of them was that the commandments are in order. So it's like the first commandment, love God with your whole heart and mind. I was like, no way. It's like, I don't love God. I don't even think he exists, but I don't love him. And so what I would do is I would go there and I would say that, I went to confession, didn't seem to do anything, even though I'm sure it did on a certain level.
Sure.
But then I started receiving, and I would say, God, I don't know if you're there. It's like, well, I don't love you. And you also know, I don't really think you're there. And if you are there, I really would love to know. And that's how that came about. So there was a searching, like in that, and you pray, I think about a lot of people that are atheists, and a lot of people that are, and I'm not talking necessarily militant atheists and things like that, but it's like, man, just try, just search, just seek, just be open. Don't close yourself down like that. It's like you deprive yourself of the greatest thing that there is. Listen, if you go and you try and then you don't find, wonderful, but I don't believe that's the case. Yeah, it's right? Like,
what are you losing?
Why would you deprive yourself of that kind of joy and fulfillment? Why would you? And so try. And for anybody who's just kind of like influenced by atheists, please, that is the thing. Seek. It's like, and then if you're an honest seeker, because that's the key, that you will find, it's like, he said it himself, and there's no liar there. So,
right. One of the things in speaking with you that I thought was just really hit home, that aha moment, let's do this podcast, your vision, you said right when we started talking, was you want Good Counsel Homes just to be the household name. You want, when someone is pregnant and maybe it's a crisis situation, or they're not sure, that the first thing they think of is not what clinic can I call, but Good Counsel, right? For all the support that I could ever need. Because not only are we a place where you can live and get support and continue your education and get job search help and financial, just all the things, which the idea that you can also just have them at, you can come full service, or you can even just say, I need some diapers this week, right? And they'll get you diapers. So it's really a full service place that just supports whatever needs you can come up with. So we want to get the word out about that. And our web person, Steve, really went through a database of all maternity homes across the United States. And in each state, he called them, vetted all of them to see what it was they did, are they active, and the process for communicating with them and contacting them. And he created a database on our website. So if you go to help.goodcounselhomes.org, it brings you to this database. And so not only can we help, but other maternities are there also. So we want to extend this message. How do we let more people know of all this good news? So what do you think of as what are you doing now? And sure, how does that lead into this new media? Where do more pro-life organizations, more maternity homes, more Catholic organizations need to be in order to get noticed?
It's great. Yeah, because I had started, like you mentioned, websites and whatnot, and I had started in the web world. That was where everything was. And I had gone on to, for about 6 or 7 years, I worked for a Catholic news and commentary site called Alatea, which was based out of Paris. And it's a global concern started by Jesus Colina, who's the founder of Zenit as well. A brilliant, very holy man. And that working in that environment, that was when websites were a thing. Like, websites were important, very important. Websites are still important, but it's not the communication vehicle of choice any longer. I mean, it's because, I mean, basically, let's put it this way: most of the world spends most of their time on one of 8 platforms, just consuming. And to be able to get into that stream, whatever platform that might be, and to get your message into that, I mean, how does anything become a household name this day and age? It's through advertising and marketing. Well, marketing particularly, but marketing through social media in particular. I pivoted back around 2018, 2019 from working with websites to going strictly to social media. Like I've found it personally, and I think for organizations in particular to be more effective also, is to communicate through social media. Not, you can have stuff live somewhere, like you can have a blog or whatever, but you've got to publish it on social as if social were the website. That right. Is the, like, in other words, if you can communicate using the quote unquote, or let's put it this way, the guardrails that each social media platform has. Instagram has 2,200 characters. You can put up 10 pictures, or you can put up a 15-second reel or a 30-second reel. If you can get your content into those packages, like, in whatever the package is. LinkedIn, you can only post 9 pictures, and you can't caption them, and you can put alt text form. Like, each one has its own specifics, but if you can take your message and put it into that, any organization, especially in the pro-life community, and we've seen successful pro-life outreach through social media. You look at Live Action; they do a tremendous job. March for Life does a tremendous job. But I think so. The first thing is that for any, let's just say in homes for mothers, you have to be out there first off. You have to be on the platforms and doing something. That's obviously the first thing. You have to be consistent with what you do. What I mean by that, I mean just in terms of putting stuff out on a regular basis, trying to get out there. One of the keys to social media is patience. It's like, it's something that patience and observation. It's like you have to be patient with what you do, like with growth, but then you have to be observant to how things perform. Mm-hmm. I know when I was working with Alatea, this is where I learned most of the stuff I learned about social media, was there were things that seemed like a good idea because everybody else was doing them. Saint quotes over pictures, very, very popular thing to do. So I was like, oh, that's easy. We'll do lots of that.
Right.
Did nothing for the pages. There was no growth, as a result of those things. Relevance and authenticity are like the 2 big things, of course. It's like, awareness comes from being present to an audience, and then they're desiring to continue to hear what you have to say. Like music, in a sense, where you like an artist, so you are always looking for something new for them. You were like, oh, I can't wait till somebody comes out with a new album. Right. So in a certain sense, you're trying to do the same thing in social media, where you're trying to put out stuff where people will come back. Mm-hmm. Because the more relevant you become to a person, the more likely they are to share your content, to engage with your content, to talk about your content with other people. So you have to give them something. There has to be something of value to what you're doing. You're talking about either entertaining, educating, informing, inspiring. Mm-hmm. These are all things that are very important. Like those are all valuable or values that if you have that in your content, it's inspiration is a big thing. Emotion is a big thing, for content. Anything, if you make a person laugh or cry, you're gonna win in the social media game if you can do that. Mm-hmm. Because that's something that people want to feel something. It's like, and really, if you think about it, you want to take the passion that you feel and get that into your posts, and in an emotionally powerful or meaningful, impactful way. Is that easy? No, it's not easy. It's you have to figure that. That's one of those things you have to figure out. It's like, I mean, that's kind of like the key. But if you can figure out, or if you can come up, and again, we're talking philosophically here, but if you can come to that, if you can spend the time, invest the time in trying to put something, to create meaningful content that way, and when you hit it, you'll know it. When I started doing work with Alatea in social media, and one of the things, I took a Post-it and I wrote on it, feel something, and I put it on my monitor. And that was the key to everything that went out, is that I had to run it through that. does it make me feel something?
Yeah.
All right. So from my perspective, I'm a very big advocate for photographs. The still photograph to me is, it's like I'm not video. Sorry, people. People ask me if I do video all the time. I really don't. I'm still a big proponent of the still image, and for a variety of reasons. One is because a single image, if it's a good image, can convey an awful lot in an instant, like a split second. It's like we process images so quickly. You see something, you get an impression. If it's really good, or if it's an emotional or an impactful or an insightful or whatever it is, that presents an idea in a person's head almost immediately. Right. That's the first thing. The second thing is it doesn't require any translation. So it doesn't matter what language a person speaks. They see it, it's universal the way it can be interpreted. One of the great lessons for me, though, and it's probably one of the greatest when it comes to images, was words. I never valued words for images other than basically stock kind of like captions, like, like New York, on such and such a day, such and such a place, this is what happened. Mm-hmm. Great. That's great if you're in the media and you're selling images through AP or Reuters or Getty. You have to do that. I understand. But if you're out there as a creator and as a communicator, that's not a good strategy. And the thing that drove it home for me was this. I've told the story 1,000 times, but when I was working as an art director, I would always look at the cover of the New York Times every day, because they had one of the best, they still to this day, still have one of the best photo departments in the business. Whatever, politically, whatever, that's not really the point. The thing is, they're photographers, and okay, cover shot, New York Times. One day I'm walking by and I looked down at the paper, it was in the newsstand, and just to see what the cover shot was, to be impressed yet again. And it was a very bad picture in the spot. And it was a picture, in the way I describe it is going to sound much more attractive than the way it actually looked. But I'm just, for you, try to imagine it being the bad version of everything I say. It's a picture of a guy sitting on a park bench in Central Park, taken from a pretty good distance. You can kind of tell he was a sanitation worker, and kind of, but but that was it. It's kind of an overcast day. Picture wasn't that good. So I stopped and I looked at it and I was like, huh. And I picked it up because I had to read what was underneath it. And then I saw the words underneath it. And it said something to the effect, I'm paraphrasing here. New York City sanitation worker Jose Rodriguez, after learning that his wife and daughter were just killed on flight 9:30. And I was like, oh, it took my breath away. The impact of that photo, the words. And I was like, words and pictures.
Words and pictures.
Words and pictures together. So if you do words and pictures, and that's it, at least that's my thing. All right. It's like, there are people great at video, people great at audio, people great at all kinds of things. But to me, as a vehicle of communication, I think it's an amazing way to communicate. Mm. Now, platforms for that, when we talk about, going back more on a tactical level to social media, that works on most platforms, but platforms behave differently.
Sure.
That is very, very effective for places like Instagram, because Instagram is kind of geared around that type of
words
thing.
And pictures. Well, now it's words, but yeah,
it works. Yeah. Facebook, because of the nature of how Facebook works these days, where it's a lot of friends and family, it's like it's really when you're posting content that has a lot to do with your close circle, like your closest 100 people in your life, then that stuff does very well. But then, right. It wasn't like
that's a conversation before. And it's very specific to an audience. And
that does well. And so when you're putting stuff like that out, like if you take the same content they use on Instagram, put on Facebook, it will not perform the same. It's like, right. That's one of the things to be aware of. Being contextual, to whatever platform you're on is important, but it's time consuming.
Very.
So like somebody like myself, I'll post the same thing everywhere because I just don't, there's not enough hours in the day.
Right.
But I just want to interject one thing that I didn't touch upon at all really, was paid. Because now everything I've been talking up to this point is about organic, organic being just posting stuff and hoping that, people see it and everything like that, and building momentum, building a following, and that's the hardest. That's the hardest. But the thing is, paid stuff for the purposes of what you guys do, and in particularly I think is critical. Now, the beauty of it is, and I'll use an anecdote to explain. I worked with a parish at one point in time that had a divorced and remarried ministry. Here's the model. The model is to target women and men over 40 years old after 10 p.m. on Friday night. That's when the ad would go. And the conversion was amazing. It's about knowing who you're trying to reach, where they're going to be at what time, and then paying to put your content in front of them, because that's effective. I mean, that's like hardcore effective. And you need a budget for that. It's like, that's one of those things where because that can actually convert, right. And for a place with the crisis pregnancy, I mean, goodness gracious, it's like conversion means lives. It's like, I mean, that's right. Like you're investing so much money to save a baby's life. That's so worth it. And the thing is that for every mom that comes into your home, it's like, in a certain sense, there's a circle around her of family and friends that it becomes aware of this as well. So, I mean, it's even smaller, but it's a first-hand account type of thing. So you're building all right. So at any rate, that's just the last point I just want to make on that.
Absolutely right. You're absolutely right. It's crucial. And so many, and I think that might even be the issue, the reason why Catholic charities, maternity homes, our resources, the money that comes into Good Counsel from our gracious donors, it goes to the homes, to running the homes.
Yeah.
So it's buying paper towels and toilet paper and, it's all the things that any of, formula, all the things that any mom needs.
Right.
And so then promotion, takes a back seat often.
Right. It's like, that's, it's obviously growth is one of those things that happens at different levels. It's like, you guys, in order to grow in support of moms, if, like, in other words, as you increase and as add homes, add people, personnel, personnel, all of it, it's like, it's a whole thing. But I guess, one of the struggles for the pro-life movement now is to get that out there. It's like, I mean, that's one of the biggest, it's one of the biggest counters to the culture. It's like, to be like, just like you had very eloquently had said earlier in the conversation about, people being able to not only, not looking for what clinic, but what, home, like be able to see the same there. In other words, the option is just as loud as, the one is just as loud as the other, if not loud. So,
you have a multitude. We have a tendency, and I don't know if it's the new media or just human nature or what, but the tendency to just pigeonhole everything into these. Nobody is the same. Everybody is absolutely unique, and everyone's situation is absolutely unique and requires an absolutely unique solution. And I think the idea that calling it woman's choice and saying, this is your only option. Right. That's a little ridiculous. So what I love and what draw me, I mean, I remember I think I just found out I was pregnant. And we had we married, we moved, and got our first apartment. And so I guess it had been several months, about 6 months after we were married, I found out we were pregnant, and we were going to this new church. And so, God kind of aligns things in your lives. And when you're meant to hear things, you're open to it. And they did a baby bottle drive. And I'd seen baby bottle drives before. It wasn't like anything new, but I was like, what is this? But what exactly is this? You just open to it in a different way, being pregnant, being newly married. And I found out and I went, oh my God, are you serious? This is what they do? Like, why is this new information to me? Why are we not all over this? Like, why isn't this just this is the answer. So that drew me to filling out a volunteer form, that drew me to volunteering, my time as a graphic designer and leading to social media management and just anything, that just wanted to be involved. I just felt like I had to be involved. So that is an exciting feeling, but you're always like left dumbstruck. Like, how is this not? How have we not all adopted this as the answer? Because we're not saying that it's going to be easy and, oh, you can have your baby and you'll be fine. Like, we're not, it's so multifaceted, everything that a maternity home like ours can offer. Um, do you want to talk a little bit about how you found Good Counsel? I mean, I know you mentioned Chris Bell and meeting him. Everyone has a Chris Bell story or a Father Groeschel story. So
Sure. Actually, my father.
yeah,
My father's very active. Well, my father's one of the OGs of the right to life world,
yeah,
I guess you could say, and which was kind of an interesting uh, way to grow up, because I think it was right around the time when Roe v. Wade happened that he went right into action. It's like
yeah,
he, before Good Counsel, before the March for Life, before everything, he was kind of like on the front lines right at the get, and formed the Right to Life Party in New York. He was ran for senator, I think, at one point in time. Just real
yeah.
grassroots, real, kind of. And he had, I don't know how he met Chris. I don't know exactly what the story is there, but I think that I brushed up against, and it's this kind of a weird thing. It's funny because I grew up with it in the house. I grew up in a Catholic household with a very
Mm.
pro-life dad. My mother, and I attribute this quote to my mother, but I'm not positive. Okay, it's like, I mean, because somebody's like, oh, I think I heard that before. I said, oh, maybe I said it. I don't know. But I remember driving to pick up my father, like when I became a teenager, to pick him up when he got arrested, like from jail and stuff like that. There was all these kind of things from protesting. And so, but my mother, and my mother, God bless her, she was, and she said, I remember once I picked him up in Connecticut, he got out of jail or something like that. And and my mother said, a dead saint is heaven, a living saint is hell, or something to that effect. And I was like, okay. Because I mean,
Yeah,
it was a strain on the family. But at any
sure.
rate, that being said, it's like I grew up in that environment of seeing, and I kind of understood, but at the same time, I had my own life, I had my own
Yeah, I
vision.
was gonna say this was
No, this. So what
pre-convert.
happened? Like, so later on in life, like then when, after 2000, like after I came into the faith, after all these different things happened, then it seemed like we were kind of coming back on together
Sure.
again. And then I would see him and this was so audacious. I don't know, audacious is the wrong word. First off, wrong-headed. I'll just put it like that. Dumb. I would show up at these things and he'd show up and I'd be like, what are you doing at my thing? Like, and I'm thinking, because it's like I had kind of, I
Right.
had come in, I had my own sense of ownership of whatever it might be, that I was involved. But he'd been there since 1972. It's like,
Yeah.
it's kind of like I'm the new kid on the block, and then,
Mhm.
but it was, I think, through that we, that I had met Chris, through encounters after that whole process, and then, I actually, Joan and Chris were at my wedding in
Oh
1992,
wow.
and there was, yeah, and actually several other life events like baptisms and things like that, and I knew them, but I didn't know until until much later in life, and
Sure.
then it all clicked together. Then it's like, and then Chris had asked me one day, he's like, hey, we'd like to get some pictures in the home, and then I started that, and then I got to see that, and then, I mean, let's put it this way. I mean, as any pro-lifer will attest to, it's like the tragedy of abortion is, and how the depth of the damage that it does to humanity as a whole, as it being, as probably not probably, as the foremost, human rights justice issue that there is. It's like a place like Good Counsel is a life raft. It's like that.
Yeah.
It's a thing that gives. It's not. I mean, all of it's important. It's like
Right.
protesting, demonstrating, prayer, especially.
Right.
But the thing is that Good Counsel's materially engaged in saving a life, and not only. I don't mean that in. I mean it in kind of like the most robust, in-depth, detailed, messy way. It's like
Yeah.
actually helping that person through that period of time, and then helping them to be able to gain the skills back, whatever it might be, in order to be able to support themselves and their child. I mean, it's like, it's just, it's heroic. It's like it's heroic on every level. And and I can see, Chris is an amazing guy. It's like And Father Grishel, I've only met once or twice over the course of my life, because he had passed away probably right about the time I was really coming into things. But I could have just said, well, I bumped into him at a thing. But it was through my father and my father's relationship with Chris, and then all of these things colliding at one point in time, and me realizing that I actually was just some punk, kind of showing up at these things. And these guys
I love that.
Since the beginning of the battle.
Humility, right? Oof.
Oh man.
Humility is always a hard lesson. So necessary, but man.
Yeah.
That's like the worst prayer. It's probably the most important, but the worst thing I've ever prayed for, because man, does God deliver humility on a regular basis in my life.
So a priest once said, and it was very, very good advice, and when I can apply it, when I remember to apply it, I try. But it was, come as a servant. Like wherever you go, like, even if you're going to a dinner that's honoring you, come as a servant, show up as a servant. You'll never be disappointed. Like that you got the worst seat at the table, or you got the thing,
right?
Or if you go to somebody, like help them clean up, help them, just show up as a servant. It's just, and it's good for us, also, because that's how Jesus came, so it was kind of like we're following the master, in that. So
when you talk about all the different ways that, people were put in your life and the road that you take, and we all have that story. If you really look back on it, that story, we're like, oh, that's why God did that at that time. You have no idea in that moment, but when you look back and you can put together this puzzle, right? It's cool. That is my continuing prayer, just my own self, my own person. And especially in my life as someone who kind of takes control, likes to be in control, likes to know what's going, and then submitting to the fact that I'm not in control, and thanks be to God, I'm not. My prayer still is, I kind of want to see what you're doing. Like, can I see your hands? That's always my prayer. Can I just see? I just want to, I'll submit to whatever you want, God, but can I see? I just want to know.
Yeah.
And I feel like I get glimpses sometimes and I go, thanks. Like, cool.
No.
Yeah. But yes, I think that's and it's funny. Everybody has their Chris Bell story, and even Chris Bell's own story is just like, one day, a woman walked into the shelter I was working at, and we couldn't, we didn't have the resources to help a pregnant woman. I mean, and right there and then, just, how do I help? I am a servant. How do I help? How do I help her? And I think that's amazing that's how this whole mission began. So I guess we're having a conversation, but we're hoping other people will listen to it. So what would you say to someone about getting involved in Good Counsel's mission? What would you say? Why do you think anyone should get involved? I mean, I feel like we've answered this question already, right? But it's on my list. So
I'll put it like this. Well, I mean, it's very simple. Good counsel is on the front lines, and like I said just a little earlier, in one of the most direct and most material ways. When there's a fire at a house, the guys who are going to go in there and put the fire out, you're those guys. So the thing is, if you're the first responders, I guess is a good way to put it. You're the people that, in the fire situation, that are building inspectors that make sure the outlets get installed properly when the place is built. There are all kinds of other people that ensure in some way that something doesn't burn down. But then there are the people that show up when it's burning down. Yeah. So in a sense, frontline first responders in the pro-life movement, that is, Good Counsel, that is crisis pregnancy centers, that is, maternity homes, like of that nature. And I think that if anybody is anybody who wants to support something and know that their money is going to something that is directly helping, like really saving a life, supporting more than one life, really.
A generation.
And you're 100% right. This is a way to do that in a very, very, beautiful way. And I mean, so just in terms of that, so financially, I think that's, very, great way to have an impact in the saving of a life, that you can have it. So.
Right. Well, to that end, I guess I will give the web address where you can donate for anyone who's listening and would like to support Good Counsel, directly helping mothers and babies. goodcounselhomes.org/donate. Very simple. If you want to donate, support. I know any amount is obviously going to be put to good use. Our favorite, we like to say, is the recurring amount. So a one-time donation is obviously is welcome, but those recurring ones, the ones that we can count on, the ones we know that $35 is coming in, $50 is coming in a month, we know we can, that's going to be a pack of diapers, that's going to be formula, we can depend, that's going to go towards this bill, we can depend on that. So that's kind of our favorite, if I could plug that. But yeah, this is it's been so great. I feel like you were right, just talk, right? Or actually, I didn't have to talk, you talked. That was even better. So I thank you so much for talking with me today and for pushing me to go forward with this podcast. And yeah, and if anyone who is listening enjoyed our discussion and has any questions, you can find Good Counsel on Facebook. You can just type in Good Counsel, Good Counsel Homes on Instagram. And then Jeff, yours is it Jeff Bruno or Jeffrey Bruno?
Just Jeffrey Bruno, yeah.
Jeffrey Bruno, at Jeffrey Bruno on Instagram and on Facebook. Okay, I think, did we do it? Did we do our first podcast?
We did, and thank you very much, Stan, for having me. This was wonderful. It was such a pleasure, and Good Counsel Homes, special place in my heart. So, God bless you guys.
If a woman is pregnant, she shouldn't have to worry about how she's going to carry, deliver, and care for her child. She can call Good Counsel. We need you to help spread the good news that Good Counsel's doors are open for all women pregnant and parenting and in need. Please join us and be an advocate for motherhood. Subscribe to our podcast, Motherhood And, on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Please be sure to visit Good Counsel's website for more information and to get involved at goodcounselhomes.org. We ask that you share our maternity help website, help.goodcounselhomes.org. Please share this website with others often so that it will reach more women in need. Subscribe to Good Counsel's YouTube channel for more inspiring and edifying content about maternity homes, the pro-life movement, and the life and ministry of Good Counsel's founder, Father Benedict Groeschel. And be sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Good Counsel Homes. If you have any questions or ideas for future guests or topics, please message us on Facebook or Instagram. Remember, life is love. Talk to you soon.